I don't even want to do that. And welcome to See Hear Love, where I'm hot, I'm sweating, but we're all good. We are. This is how we start Wednesdays, and I'm so glad that Cheryl and Joanne are with us, with me, and our very special guest, Marcia Shelton, Director of Family Services with Yonge Street Mission, YSM, in Toronto. Welcome.
Thank you.
We had a great time with you on Monday.
Yes, we did.
I had a phenomenal time.
Did you?
Yes.
Oh, guys, phenomenal.
I have phenomenal. Can't even say the word.
Phenomenal. I think that you're the first guest that has said that.
Fantastic.
For real?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Thank you, Marcia.
I've set the bar now.
Yeah, you totally have. Well, we talked on Monday about a really great verse, 1 John 4:17-19, and we sort of like unpacked it about, you know, growing in love. We learned this. Or whatever that role, you know, God to us to love, He loves us, we love others, and Cheryl did this. I loved what Joanna shared about the sort of the process of growing in love with God. You know, you shared about, and Cheryl about there's no fear in love, and that it takes time to see, you know, the love change a person. It can't be like instantaneous. So wonderful, really great things that came out of that.
So good.
In that now, Marcia, what we want to do today is hear more about your story and more about families in crisis. So we sort of set the foundation with the verse of how we are to love those and those in crisis. But now it's more about sort of spotlight on you and about what you do. So let's start just with you, your background, and then a tragedy that has happened in your life that I know has impacted the work that you do and the way that you see the world today.
So for myself, I'm the eldest of 3, and I have a sister and a brother that lived in Canada. We grew up together in Scarborough. The tragedy that happened was a few years back in 1990. I had planned a camping trip, actually. So the plan of the camping trip was to get my sister, my brother, and our friends together. I was a Christian. And I thought, oh, this would be an amazing time to get non-Christian friends and Christian friends together so they could see Christian life is not boring. That was the desire. That weekend ended up in tragedy, where my brother had drowned.
Wow.
My sister and I, we actually watched him drown. So, and hearing him call out for help, and we were canoeing. So he knew how to swim. He was very athletic. It was the last canoe trip out for the night, and we were going to go home. It was the July 1st long weekend. So every July 1st for our family is challenging. My brother had just turned 23 in June. He was doing really well. Good looking. I have to admit, he was a good-looking young man. He was buff. I don't know if they still use that word. But that really tore our family apart. It was my mom's only son, my father's only son, and he was vibrant, loved by many. And it was interesting. The call for help, at first because he was a joker, him and his friends joked around a lot, and because we knew he could swim, we never took him seriously until we realized. And by the time we turned our canoes around, he was already pulled under, and the current, where they were searching for him, he wasn't there. The current had taken him further down. And that spiraled our family into trauma that we would never thought we would experience.
And the feelings of guilt, too.
Guilt.
Right?
I blamed myself a lot because I planned the trip, and I thought, what if I didn't plan the trip? So there was a lot there. And at that, for myself, you become emotionally detached in order to cope. A lot of crying. And one thing that I learned, grieving is demonstrated in different ways. So for me, I was open to talk about it with anybody that wanted to listen. I would just break down and cry. My dad never talked about it. He just shut down. My mom couldn't even look at a picture of my son, of my brother. I have a son, and I actually named him after him. And many times I call him Ian. His name's Nathaniel, but so that's why. And there's so many nuances about his personality that remind me of my brother. But that was a hard transition. And for a family, we couldn't talk about it often. It took years. It took years for my mom to heal. It took years. And even now, you still feel the pain. And it seems senseless, but in that, it questions your faith. And so you never can prepare for trauma, for crisis. So as a family, Nobody wakes up saying, okay, let's have trauma today. Let's have a crisis, right? We all plan that our family lives are going to be healthy, fun, great memories, and then life happens. And we wonder where God is in those times. And so for me, it was reevaluating my faith, reevaluating relationships, reevaluating who I am, and how much responsibility does one take when crisis happens and things that are out of your control.
So has that helped you? I mean, it then makes a lot of sense that you are now working with families in crisis in the work that you do as Director of Family Services with YSM.
Now it makes sense.
Now it makes sense. I think at the time you're like, what?
Yeah,
God,
exactly.
really? You're throwing me back into crisis when I've had to go through the journey and process of dealing with crisis in my own family, and now you're putting me right back into that?
Right.
How was that? I mean, were you kind of like, really, God?
Exactly. Because talking to many of the families, it brings back some memories, right? Of their loss, their grief. And a lot of times, loss and grief is not just the death of a loved one. Loss and grief comes from a divorce. Loss and grief comes from being evicted from your apartment because you've lost your job and can't pay your rent. Loss and grief comes from domestic abuse that causes you to flee, and then you're in a shelter and you have no privacy. So those kind of traumas are very real. And so being put into that and having me to face my own pain, that's what actually brings healing. That's where love can transform, right?
I love that.
Is allowing the pain to be dealt with, right?
Now, as you said on Monday's episode, about how you had a real passion for youth, and then were transitioning in your role into working with the whole family. And so even from your own context of your own experience with that, as an individual going through grief and trauma versus your entire family unit, what do you see as the power of working with the whole family as opposed to just the youth by themselves?
The family is not, the individuals are not isolated. We impact one another. And a lot of times, and it's no fault of anybody really, we tend to focus on the individual that is going through the change. So a child that might be having mental health, we might just focus on the child trying to deal with their struggles of their mental health, right? But the rest of the family, the siblings, how are they adjusting? How is the parent coping? When you deal with, for example, in my family's case, the loss of my brother, we were grieving in different ways, but how does that affect the whole family unit? How can we rebuild and strengthen the unit so we don't fall apart? When a father loses a job and he's dealing with his self-esteem, we might tend to just focus on the father and say, go get counseling. But what about the partner he has at home? What about the children now that see the father stressed, he's not laughing anymore? They have to learn to understand. So that's what working with the whole family does. It doesn't isolate, but it brings everybody together as and the scripture talks about being a body, unity. We all have a role to play. So that's how we do that.
Question for you. I heard a lot of, I can only imagine the amount of examples and things you faced, stories and crisis, and it all looks different every day.
Yes.
But I feel like there's a common thread. And when you look at dysfunction in all of its forms and the different problems that are going on and hurts and pains, what are you seeing as a common thread with all of those families?
That's a really good question. The common thread that I would say that when you look at crisis and you look at fear, it isolates you. A lot of the families are isolated. New immigrant families, when they come, they feel isolated. An abused mother feels isolated. A woman that's been raped feels isolated. A child that has mental health feels isolated. Being displaced from your home, you're isolated.
So I would say impoverished, you're isolated.
Wow, I never even thought about that connection.
I just felt like there was one, but I couldn't put my finger on it.
So on what Cheryl's saying, when you say families in crisis, how would you define that to give us a picture? Because then obviously we're like, how can we help? What can we do? Because we know YSM is doing the good work, but who are the people groups that would you say are predominantly in crisis, and what would define a family in crisis? Because I think everybody would say, well, we're all in crisis. Like every family has had a crisis happen or trauma. But there is a definition about that.
So from experience, crisis is anything that undermines the stability of family. Whatever's going to tear that family unit apart is crisis. So it's not minimizing the trials and the struggles that we have as family members, right? Because we're all different personalities, we have different gifts, right? We have different approaches. So there's going to be struggle. But you can have a family unit that understands the differences and can work through communication, loving one another, staying in things during the challenges. But when a family starts to fall apart, when a family feels that they have no hope, when a family feels that it's out of their control and there's nothing that could be done, that's when I would say that's when the stability of families is undermined, and that's crisis.
And when we look at Toronto, because that's the closest major city to us, what would you say are those impacted mainly by within families in crisis?
New immigrants and single parents, predominantly single mothers, but there are some single fathers.
Wow.
That is 58% of our families within Regent Park are living in poverty, and they're new immigrants and single parents.
Wow, that's a big number.
That's a huge number when you think of a community. So if you multiply that with other communities, Moss Park, St. Jamestown.
And these are all areas within Toronto.
Within Toronto,
right?
And then you even go further out, right? Across Canada, Montreal, Winnipeg. They're one of the next two highest populations of poverty, of families in crisis. Unfortunately, Toronto leads with 27%. Then Toronto leads with 27%. Then there's Quebec with 24, and then Winnipeg with 21. I could be off a little bit on the numbers, but yes, we are the top 3 cities for Canada, right?
So with that in mind, those are big numbers. You're in Toronto. What is YSM doing? I know there's specific things that you are doing as far as programs, which I know are transferable to people all over the world. Right. So what are some of the key programs and initiatives that you're doing to help families in crisis? And what can we do to get behind and support?
Okay. So YSM, Angie Drasovic is our CEO, and she has done a phenomenal job at restructuring us and helping us to really focus on what God is calling Yonge Street Mission to do in this time. Because we've been around so long and it's changed, right? Before it was about men, now it's about all population groups. So we focus on youth, street-involved youth. We focus on the chronically poor and then families. So within the family context, we do preventative and restorative work. And the preventative work is giving families access that cannot normally pay for education, right? A lot of our marginalized families, they may have an income of under $30,000, right? And some of our families have 7 people in their family unit. And so think about the numbers when you crunch.
I know the price of rent in Toronto.
Exactly. It's insane. And housing is a crisis. Affordable housing is a crisis. So how do we respond? We respond by education. We have after-school homework clubs that are free for the community members, where they feel loved and they're learning. We're building self-esteem and confidence and leadership. We address some of the systemic issues of bullying and what they experience in education. We have educational tutoring supports for young people that the system has given up on in the education system. The youth that they would just keep pushing through and drop out and never think that they could go to post-secondary. We have daycare, subsidized daycare, where the families are just loved and nurtured. We have our care management portion. This is where we focus on working with families in crisis. And we will journey with those families as long as they, in a collaborative manner, as long as they want us to work with them.
I'm so glad that you addressed that, because at the end of the day, when you look at domestic situations, you look at child abuse, it's so easy to paint a monster picture, but some of these families are frustrated. They're at their wits' end. They are not coping well with what is happening. You know, the financial situation, the no food on the table, and sometimes they lash out. And so by addressing some of these things, and even that affects learning too.
It does.
A child that has no food and is starving can't learn. So everything is kind of all connected. And if you address that, you can ease some of that. And that's not for every situation, but there are some situations that it's really driven by the environment that they're in.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I would say, as we talked about on Monday, that Young Street Mission takes it further and addresses the spiritual life of a person.
Yeah, right.
There are lots of other organizations and government things in the city that that address some of these issues,
Yes.
but holistic includes
Yeah, I love that.
the spiritual, soulful
Yes.
life of a person.
Yes,
And that you're
definitely.
praying, right? And I love that idea that as we know God, we're loving in the way that He does, because it's hard work.
Yes.
I also know what I love is that you have a mentoring program as well. I'm big on that, and so are you a part of that?
Yes, the
In
family to
mentoring?
family mentoring.
Yeah, I love
Yes,
that.
Yes. How that was birthed actually was a parent. It was going into a long weekend last year, the Easter long weekend. And this mom had an emotional breakdown. And we were supporting her and encouraging her and telling that we care for her and there for her. And what pierced my heart, she said to me, she goes, Marcia, I know that you guys care and you're here for me, but at the end of the day, you're going home to your families. Who am I going home to? My son and I, nobody's going to invite us to their house to have dinner and have laughter. It hit me so hard that I realized we have to do more than just provide services. How are we going to embrace these families so we know that they know that it's not a Monday to Friday job and it's not 9 to 5. And it's just another agency in their life. And a lot of families that live in poverty have so many people, professionals in their life. They have social workers, they have children's aid workers, they have doctors, mental health counselors, right? So many people, but where is the relationship?
And that's what sets
key.
Young Street Mission apart. You
So
come
good.
alongside.
So that's how, and that's how the family to family mentoring was birthed from that. And then praying about it and saying, okay, Father, what is it that you want us to do? How can we address this situation in a practical way, but also maintaining healthy boundaries, right? Because that's also a tricky dance, is maintaining those healthy boundaries. And this is, so it's phenomenal. And you're engaging community, you get to engage churches. There's families that are phenomenal. They've gone through stuff themselves. They have strengths and stories and solutions that they can pass on. And then these families could also, that we work with, can also teach families that never gone through maybe some of the things they have, what resilience is, what perseverance is, what endurance is, right?
Yeah,
So
that's good. You're so passionate about it. I can see it. You're like coming alive with that. I wanted to ask you about what See, Hear, Love means to you, but I'm going to actually have you put that on a blog post for us, because I know that there's a special woman and women that are watching the show that we want to highlight, because Wednesday is what, Cheryl?
Oh my gosh. Wednesday's the new Sunday, people. Listen to me. I haven't done this in a long time. I'm so excited. The Bible says that we should esteem our brothers higher than ourselves, and we love to really celebrate and honor a sister that's just championing a cause, undercover superhero, and who's our woman's crush today?
It's one of yours.
Marva Tyndale.
Ooh, Marva
She
Tyndale.
is my woman.
Okay, tell us about it. She is my woman, because I know
love
there's going to be
that.
also more information about her on our blog post, but do a little gush on her, Marcia.
Marva is phenomenal. She has a heart for the Father. She has a servant heart. And you know what? I have to give this little tidbit. When I met Marva, I didn't know that there was family history. So my mom's family in Jamaica they're very close. So when Marva was getting married in Jamaica, my aunt, Dahlia, which is my mom's cousin, actually made Marva's bouquet. So when we met, I didn't know. I had no clue that Marva and my family were already connected back then. How I met Marva is when I was youth pastor at Dorset Park Baptist Church. And I was working with youth in the community. So these youth were gang involved. They were kingpins. And they were youth coming from a lot of broken homes. And I met Marva. Somebody introduced us at an event. And we were just sharing. And when I heard about her passion for young people and the book that she wrote, I brought her book actually,
I see it.
Keeping Our Hope Alive.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the book she's written?
That's the book she's written. And she gave me the book, and she actually wrote in it. And it's funny because you see how God directs our path. I have to read what she wrote. It says, Marcia, stay armed and battle ready. And she gave me Ephesians 6. Arise as a mother, Deborah. You are anointed to restore village life here in your community and wherever God places you.
Amazing.
Village life.
Village
And that's what I'm doing
women
right
to
now.
women, I know.
Family
Amazing.
personified.
Exactly. And who would have thought?
Yeah.
She inspires me because of her passion and her humility and her relentless love of families and youth and just pouring
I
out.
love that.
Right?
What a great women crush. And to Marva, because I know you're watching, thank you for being a great mentor and making impact in Marcia's life.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Thank you. And this is her book, so we'll put
That's
all that
her
information up on our website as well.
Yeah.
Whew!
Awesome.
What a show. Marcia, thank you so much. Joanna, Cheryl, great thoughts, such good work. We'll be praying for you and the work at YSM and with Angie and the team. I know I have to do a shout out, but Mona and Iris are in the studio audience watching. And I'm going to say this to you off camera, but thank you so much for the good work that you guys do with YSM. Again, honored that you have partnered with us here at See, Hear, Love. And again, thank you for the incredible life-changing work that you do.
Yeah.
Thank you for the honor to speak about the work that Young Street Mission does collectively.
Yeah.
Thank you for being ambassadors of love.
I like that, ambassadors of love.
It's great.
I like that.
Well, what a Wednesday. There's so much for the 2 days you've been here. It's been so great. And to viewers and listeners, thank you for joining us again. And like we've always said, if you have thoughts, comments, please connect with us on our website, and we will see you on Friday. Bye-bye.